The structure of the presentation is the following. After a brief introduction of myself, that you can see who I am, what academic and professional background I have, I would like to put a focal point a little bit on the subject matter of my PhD dissertation. Don't be afraid, I really want to limit this technical part to the absolute minimum, but nevertheless I want to present you the field of research, the research object, subject and purpose of the dissertation, the scientific and practical contribution I expected which the dissertation might have, the hypothesis and the structure of my dissertation, the research approach and the methods I applied, and the main outcomes and results I came during my dissertation. But what I think is more of your interest is the story behind. So my individual roadmap to become a PhD. It was a long road in my case, quite a long road, but nevertheless the road led to a successful end. And based on my experiences, I would like to give you some advice, if I may, under point 4. But let me start now with a brief introduction of myself. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. My name is Marcel Bode, and I'm German national. I'm an official civil servant of the European Union, working for the European Court of Auditors a couple of years. And from an academic point of view, I studied business management and international economics at 3 universities. So I obtained 3 academic degrees from 2 German universities and 1 from Spain. During the course of my professional career, I obtained 3 professional qualifications, all in the field of audit and examination. The last one was the Certified Fraud Examiner, then a Certified Public Accountant, the CPA, and a Certified Public Government Auditing Professional. In the year 2019, I already said, I successfully completed my PhD studies and was awarded with a PhD at the WZF University. And from a professional point of view, I have more than 16 years of professional experience in the audit domain. So all my professional life is more or less dedicated to audit in various fields and from different angles. First, I started in the private sector at the big audit, at the big 4 company. There I was most of the time auditing banking engagements, first in the United States and later on in Germany, in Munich. After a couple of years, I changed the perspective and switched to the public sector. I was hired as a senior auditor in a German audit authority for structural funds, and this was exactly the first time when I got in contact with the European Union, with the European Union's policies, and in particular with the European Union cohesion policy. This was in 2009, and this indirectly marks the beginning of my dissertation, to say, or of my doctoral or of my individual doctoral program, because this was the time when I actually started dealing with my topic I later on covered with the PhD dissertation. I already started in 2009 the first publications on this subject matter, namely the audit authorities and the cohesion policy. Further down the line, I worked as an external auditor at the European Commission at DG Regio in Brussels. Here, I changed, of course, the viewpoint from the national perspective. I moved on to the European perspective and monitored the audit work of the member states. I was most of the time in charge for Germany and Austria, but also I carried out some audit missions to Bulgaria. I do remember very well, it was about the wastewater treatment investment strategy in Bulgaria at that time. Quite interesting. And since the year 2015, beginning of 2015, I've been working as an auditor at the European Court of Auditors. During the course of my academic and professional life, I elaborated more than 20 publications up to now. So here I tried as much as possible also to deal scientifically and theoretically with the topics I deal with on my work. Next slide, please. Coming now to the subject matter of my dissertation. Thank you very much. Let me start with the field of research, just to set a little bit the scene that you have a kind of a taste what my dissertation was about. Well, let me start with some very general and broad things. According to the founding treaties of the European Union, our union is committed to create more and better jobs, to create a socially inclusive society, and to reduce the development disparities between the regions. So these are core principles, core objectives our union is founded upon. And in the cohesion policy, the member states shifted power from national power to the European level. And in the Treaty of the Function of the European Union, cohesion policy is defined, and the power is transferred by this Treaty of the Function of the European Union. So the cohesion policy is a European policy field, and it's a very central policy field, in fact, because it reduces the development disparities between the various regions and the backwardness of the least favored regions. It's also a quite controversial field of research. There are plenty of publications, plenty of papers, reports, evaluations dealing with the cohesion policy, dealing with the effectiveness, and also with the intervention logic. And there are opposing views how to structure it and whether it is effective or not. It's a quite controversial field of research, but it's also a very important field. This is a matter of fact. It's a very important field from a financial perspective, from a monetary perspective, because it accounts for around 1/3 of the European budget. And if you consider that more than 90% of the next generation's EU financial envelope of more than 750 billion euros is implemented via cohesion policy, then you get a taste that this policy field is very important for the European Union as a whole. Cohesion policy is implemented under the so-called shared management mode. This is a special budget mode, how to implement the European budget, meaning that the European Commission is jointly in charge for implementing the budget and also this policy field jointly with the member states. And whenever you have a joint responsibility, you have a complicated system. You have different layers of decision makers. You have different control, monitor, and audit layers. You have a very sophisticated system, a very complicated system. And in this system with various principal agent relationships with national budget involved, it is very important to have a proper and effective management and control system just to achieve the objectives and to create an impact for this policy field. And having said this, it is interesting to see that since the 2007-2013 programming period, for the first time in European history, a formal three-level control structure was introduced at national level with three authorities. First of all, we have a managing authority which is in charge for the implementation of the policy field, to set a strategy, to select operations, to monitor the operations. And then we have a certifying authority which is in charge for the accounting and payment settlement function. And at the third, we have an audit authority. The audit authority is actually the first independent audit layer at national level, or the last line of defense to defend the European money at national level. Let me share or explain you a little bit what is the programming period for those who are not that familiar with this field. Well, you know, the European budget is planned and implemented according to a 7-year cycle. This is so-called the multi-annual financial framework. So every 7 years there is a big debate at European level where the money should be spent for. So the budget and also the policy fields are planned around the 7-year budget. And for the cohesion policy, we talk about program period because we have a program and a legislative package applicable for 7 years. And this is the so-called program period. And we have, every 7 years, we have a different legal setup, which might the world quite complicated, you see later on. Thank you very much. Can you please go to the next slide? In this context, my research object was the incorporation of the national audit authorities in the management and control system of the European Union's cohesion policy, the tasks entrusted to the audit authorities, and the legal framework determining the audit authorities' work. More precisely, I concretely dealt with the following research subjects, namely the functions and responsibilities of the audit authorities, and how these functions and responsibilities have been developed over the different programming periods. So here I looked at, from the outset, from the 7-13 programming period over the 14-20 programming period, and even for the post-2020 program period, which is now the program period 21-27. I also had a look at the audit authorities' effect or potential effects on the assurance level of the European Union's spending. So here I had a look at the long-term development of the irregular spending. And the irregular spending you can measure, for instance, this is one indicator, on the error rates reported by the European Court of Auditors for this budget field. The overall purpose of the dissertation was to conclude on whether the evolution of the responsibilities of the audit authorities contributed towards a more robust management and control system for the delivery of the cohesion policy funds, and this results in less funds spent ineligibly. And here this I measured based on the error rates reported by the Court of Auditors. Coming now to the contributions, next slide please. To the contributions I expected from this dissertation, let me start with the scientific contribution. And here one can state that the scientific area of the management and control system in cohesion policy with a special focus on the audit authorities was not very well developed. You find plenty of publications, reports, assessments, studies, notes, which deal with cohesion policy and also with the governance structure, but not dealing particularly with the audit authorities' role in this governance structure. There are very little available. I mean, it's a very niche area. And against this background, the study or my research project was the first that investigates actually the evolution of the functions and responsibilities of the audit authorities from their origination, from the outset on. And by this, it provides a holistic and comprehensible overview of this field. It also critically assessed at that time the proposed future legal setup applicable to the audit authorities. I highlight here the proposed future legal setup because I finished my dissertation in 2019, and at that time the legal framework for the programming period 21-27 was not yet enacted. There was only a legislative proposal drafted by the Commission, and I based my dissertation on this legislative draft. Ex post, one can say that the finally enacted regulations have not changed materially compared to the legislative drafts. I also tried to link the development of the tasks entrusted to the audit authorities over time to the development of the legality and regularity of the budget execution. So here I try to link the audit authorities' tasks with or try to show whether there is an effect on the ineligible spending of the European budget. From a practical point of view, the results of the dissertation might be used by different stakeholders. For instance, the member states might use the outcome of the dissertation to decide how they will structure the audit work and maybe on which entity they will appoint the audit function. The audit authorities itself or themselves might use the study results to properly plan and allocate the audit work and to formulate a sound audit strategy and maybe to reflect upon the tasks and the importance of the tasks they are entrusted with and the workload associated with it, with the tasks, and to maybe to draft a proper audit plan. But the results might also trigger maybe legislative discussion on potential issues in this governance structure and might feed into future legislative proposals. Next slide, please. Having said this, I formulated an overall hypothesis which I tried to confirm or to reject, depending on the outcome, during the course of my research studies. And the hypothesis was whether the audit authorities play an important role in the management and control framework of the European Union's cohesion policy. Their responsibilities are manifold and have developed over the programming periods, and the responsibilities of the audit authorities have been increased and become more complex over the programming periods, and led to an increased assurance level for the eligibility of the cohesion policy funds. I know it's very, very technical and I don't want to torture you more, but this was the hypothesis I tried to confirm. It is confirmed, I will show later on. And in order to confirm this hypothesis, I structured the dissertation in 3 main parts, starting with the introduction, then followed by a main part, and I wrapped up with an overall conclusion. The main part itself also comprised of 3 sub-main parts, to say, a theoretical and conceptual framework part, setting the scene, and to guide to the functions and responsibilities of the audit authorities in the second main part. And the third part is dedicated to the typology and specificities of the financial instrument. This is a special implementation mode of cohesion policy, which is very particular to grants. You know, you can implement cohesion policy via grants and financial instruments, and there are totally different rules to it. And it's very challenging for all the implementing bodies, but also for the audit authorities. So I dedicated a separate section to it. Next slide, please. From a methodological point of view, I executed the following tasks. I carried out literature review and executed analysis. I carried out a theoretical analysis. I collected, systemized, and analyzed statistical data, put them into relation, and presented presented the results in tables and graphs. So it was a really an in-depth review of all the potential literature available, or I could found at European level on this subject matter. The methods applied here again, it's very technical, but nevertheless, in each dissertation, you also need to state which methods you applied. And from this point of view, I applied a logical and historical approach and combined it with a comparative analysis. I used analysis, synthesis, abstraction, concretization, induction, deduction. So very, very technical terms, but all these different methods and approaches I applied. Next slide, please. Coming now to the main results. So what I discovered, or what I came across during the course of my research work. Well, first of all, the work of the audit authorities provide an essential foundation for appraising the legality and regularity and for the proper use of the cohesion policy resources. And this is based on a so-called single audit concept, where the European Commission tries to rely as much as possible on a further audit layer and do not carry out its own audit work or to an absolute minimum. It's a kind of a cascade mechanism where each level tries to rely as much as possible on the audit work and the audit results of the previous one. The audit authorities are entrusted with a multitude of tasks, this I can clearly confirm, and the responsibilities of the audit authorities have been increased in quantity but also in complexity over time, over different programming periods. And in general, we can see that the 2007-2013 programming period saw a clear strengthening of the accountability arrangements and the reinforced internal control system. And the audit authorities are one brick into this new wall of control arrangements, but a very significant brick, a corner brick to say. And it contributed materially to the significant drop in the level of the irregularities we can observe. Coming from a level of irregularities of more than 10%, so meaning 10% of the expenditure paid from the European budget in cohesion policy was ineligible before 2007-13 programming period. And this dropped materially to 4 or 3% in the recent years, which is clearly an indication that the management and control system got more robust compared to previous programming periods. And we are about to achieve or to reach the 2% materiality level in the future. Of course, we can say that the audit authorities are an important part of this strengthened management control system, but further, and this I recommend that further research must examine to which degree this trend, so this reduction in the error rate, is actually attributable to the work of the audit authorities. There are plenty of innovations strengthening the management control system, and the audit authorities is only one of it, but a material one. However, the results clearly indicate a strong correlation between the audit authorities' work and the robustness of the management control system, knowing that correlation is not causation, but there is a clear indication of it. Next slide, please. So this was the technical part. Just to provide you an overview of what my dissertation was about. Coming now to the story behind, to my personal roadmap. Maybe this is of more interest to you. Well, I can, first of all, let me say, I hear an echo, that the road to become a PhD is unique to everybody. Every one of us has its own background and impediments, and there is no normal or usual way of getting it done. You know, going for PhD studies is different than doing a bachelor's or a master's studies. Usually you are older when you do a PhD program, and the older you are, the more commitments you have in life. You work, for instance, you have family, you have other obligations and commitments to do, and a PhD program is also not, or usually not, that structured as it is the case with a bachelor or a master's studies. So you are much more free. You are much more free to do the things, and there is no way how to best to do it. Don't feel pushed by other peers who force you to get it done in 2 years, in 1 year, in 3 years, and so on and so forth. Everybody of us has its own impediments, and I'm quite a good example that even if it takes a very long time, you can successfully. In my case, it took me 10 years from the start, when I started dealing with this topic, to the PhD degree. Well, having said this, my motivation to become a PhD actually started when I finished my first academic degree in 2004. I realized when I drafted when I worked on my more on my thesis for my German diploma that I liked actually the work. I liked the research work, to dig deeper into a topic, to formulate hypotheses, to prove something, to draft an opinion, and just to deal scientifically and academically and theoretically with a topic. And this was actually the first time I thought about, well, I could very well imagine to go one day for a doctoral program. But of course, it took me. Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
But it took me plenty of more years to make it more concrete. But motivation, but everything starts, of course, with your individual motivation, and I would like to go now to my four main motivation points I had in order to go for this PhD program. And if we go through these 4 points, you might see, or you might realize that all these 4 points are intrinsic motivation points. There was no extrinsic motivation, like to earn more money with a PhD, or to get a better job, or to get more prestige, or whatever. No. This was not the case in my case, and I'm convinced when you're only driven by these external factors, I'm not sure whether you will get it done in the long run, because you need a very long breath in order to get a PhD study done. So you really need to want it. And my reasons were, first of all, I realized that I'm interested in dealing with a subject from an academic point of view. I realized that I liked to combine practical things with a theoretical foundation. And I also realized that I like to elaborate publications and to make statements, and to prove statements. But I also liked very much the collaboration with the academia. I just like the environment of a university. I like the discussion with the students, discussions with the professors, just the academic environment of a university. I have very good memories to it, and therefore I wanted to continue somehow. So the motivation was there to go for a PhD program, but how to do it? After I graduated from a German university, I started my first work. It was at that time in New York for this Big Four company. A new country, a new continent, a new language, a new job, high demanding job, a really high demanding job, new living and working environment. My daily agenda was really packed with so many different tasks, and I actually didn't know where to start, and even didn't dare to think about to go for a PhD program on top of it. So I needed to get settled in my job. Moreover, quite soon, after a year, I was already approached by my employer and more or less pushed to go for the first professional examination. It was a CPA. And so I prepared roughly 1 year for this professional qualification. It took me really much of efforts to prepare for it, and so there was purely not time to follow the idea to go for doctoral studies. And on top of it, of course, you never should forget, there's also a family. There's also a family there. Maybe you have a wife, kids. All these are factors that might hinder you to put another burden on your shoulder. So this was from this perspective, but also from another perspective, I even didn't have any research topic. Neither I had a supervising professor nor university. I just had the very foggy idea to become a PhD someday. So what to do? The long-term vision was there, but how to get it done? Well, you know, as a typical German, I tried to structure a little bit this the problem and to develop a broad strategy. And my strategy was actually to accept the impediments, to accept the impediments and to turning them into success factors. I was not trying to get rid of the impediments because I wanted to work, I wanted to have a family, I wanted to go for professional qualifications. I didn't want to stop it and to full or to entirely change my life. But the question was now how to turn the impediments into success factors. And on the next slide, I can present you the main points of my strategy I developed for myself. Well, first, I thought it's very good to stay in contact with the academia. I was anyhow interested in staying in contact with the academia. For instance, at my German university, from time to time, I gave practice sharing sessions in front of students on work-related matters. I also met sometimes informally with the professors, and with all these occasions, I shaped my approach how to get it done, how to formulate a research proposal, how to approach universities, and so the approach was shaping and shaping and shaping more and more. Furthermore, I started publishing articles on topics with relation to my practical work. I just started elaborating articles because I was just interested in this, and I clearly saw that there might be certain advantages in the long run when elaborating articles. For instance, first of all, you need to deal scientifically with a topic, which prepares you very well for a potential future PhD thesis. You have the possibility to elaborate a topic which is worth dealing with it for a doctoral program. So whenever you deal with a topic from a scientific or a theoretical point of view, you might come across an issue which is not very well touched in the literature and which is worth to dig deeper. So this was another advantage with starting on publications. You familiarize yourself with the scientific community and its methods and approaches. And you also get known to the scientific community. And with some articles in your backpack, you might have the possibility to use these articles as a testimonial or reference for professors. I think it's a convincing argument when you approach the university and the professor to accept you for a PhD student when you already have something written. This is definitely an asset. And moreover, I also had in my mind the idea, maybe someday I might use all the articles and publications for my doctorate program. If not directly, but indirectly, as it might form a kind of a backbone of a future doctoral study. And this was exactly the case. With me, I could use my articles as a backbone, as a kind of a skeleton for my doctoral studies. Of course, I recrafted everything, I amended everything, I reshuffled everything, I extended everything, I elaborated other things more in depth, but at least the skeleton was there. The skeleton was there. Moreover, the third important point of my strategy was I needed to develop a broad research topic. Without a research topic, it would not make sense to approach any professor in any university. First of all, you need to know what you want to write about and what you want to do research about. So I formulated a broad research topic. Actually, the topic was about something in cohesion policy. It was not very precise at that point of time, but at least it dealt with audit authorities and cohesion policy. So I already had something there. And the last point, of course, also one of the most important points was to look for universities and professors who are open and willing to accept your research topic and also my individual syllabus and my individual plan, because normally in Germany, it is the case when you go for a doctoral program, you are full-time or at least part-time hired at a university or at an institute, and you do most of the time you do the research for the professor. You elaborate publications also together with the professor. You hold lectures. You correct exams. Sorry. But only little time is dedicated to your actual research work, and this is one of the reasons why Germans take far too long to successfully complete their PhD studies. So this was not my endeavor, and my motivation is to do this. I really wanted to have it on an individual plan as an external PhD student. Next slide, please. So I looked for quite a long time for universities, first in Germany and then abroad, who might be open to my research proposal. And of course, it turned out that it was very, very complicated. It was very complicated, and if you put yourself in the shoes of a professor who is approached from a student not known with a quite of an exotic topic, and on top of it with individual plans. I mean, to be honest, why should they deal with you? Because it only means additional efforts. I could imagine, and I would comply even with this attitude, because the professors are also packed with plenty of work, not only with research work and teaching work, but also with all this administrative stuff. But luckily, and this was my biggest luck in my scientific life, to say, I found the VUZF University, and this was really by coincidence, because at that time I shared an office at the European Court of Auditors. I shared an office with a colleague who was Bulgarian national, and she was also a PhD, and also I think she was an assistant professor at that time. And we talked about my motivation and my background, and yeah, it was how it was, and she proposed to initiate a contact to Professor Dr. Virginia Chelyaskova, and she initiated the contact, and she really was the icebreaker, and she served as an advocate. I mean, my colleague, she really served as an advocate, and thanks to her, I got first time in contact with Professor Chelyaskova in October 2018. I'm not sure whether this contact would have been taken place without the testimonial of my colleague, but at least she really served as an advocate. She really served as an advocate and enabled me to talk to Professor Chelyaskova about general aspects, general things. We talked about my endeavor. We talked very broadly about the possibilities at the VUZF University, and I broadly explained what I'm gonna write about. She gave me some hints and some remarks. And based on this, I prepared an amended research proposal, which I presented in front of Professor Chelyaskova in December 2018. So the first meeting was in October, or the first contact was in October, and first time we met in person was in December. I traveled to Bulgaria. It was by coincidence that I was on an audit mission in Bulgaria, and I could use the time also to talk to Professor Chelyaskova and to visit the first time the VUZF University. We talked about my proposal, about my background. She gave me valuable remarks and comments, and together we drafted more or less a broad structure of a potential dissertation. Back in Luxembourg, I immediately started working on my research proposal, amended everything, took her advice on board, and submitted my official application for enrolling in a doctoral program in the form of an individual plan, yeah, in December 2018, so even before Christmas. And even before Christmas, I luckily received the approval of my application by the Department of Finance and by the Scientific Council of the WZF University. And this was, of course, definitely one of my biggest Christmas presents. And it really marked actually the beginning of the hot phase, to say, of my dissertation. It was actually the first time that I really realized, wow, I could really get it done. It's now in a formalized structure, and I immediately started working full speed on this dissertation. But first, I tried to complete as soon as possible the 3 obligatory assignments on economics, research, methodology, investments, and corporate governance. So I really wanted to get rid of these assignments to fully concentrate on my dissertation. And I worked on this dissertation and provided my supervising professor, which was actually Professor Dr. Chelyadskova, with regular updates on my dissertation, on the directions I go, which points I wanted to have a look at, how I structure the dissertation in this or in that point. And she all the time gave me very, very soon her feedback, and it was a very, very streamlined conversation with her, very, very informal, and it was really a perfect and very good cooperation. And this enabled me to be as much as efficient with the drafting of my dissertation. And I don't want it to lose time just because I went in a certain direction, which at the end turned out, well, this is a totally wrong direction, and from a methodological point of view, it doesn't make sense. So I really was in close cooperation with my supervising professor. And already in June 2019, I could submit my first draft of the dissertation. You might think now, well, just half a year since the enrollment, you already you submit your first draft of the dissertation. Of course, it's a very short period of time. But you should not forget that basically I started first time working for this dissertation or this doctoral studies, even indirectly, in 2009, when I started working for the national audit authorities and started elaborating my first articles on this subject matter. So I could resort on plenty of information and plenty of work already done, which I used then, of course, as a backbone, as I already said, for my dissertation. In June, I think it was also in June, end of June, I received the feedback from the members of the Department of Finance on a draft. And of course, there were quite a lot of comments. And these comments meant additional work, quite a lot of work. But retrospectively speaking, it was very valuable remarks. And these remarks inevitably boosted the quality of my dissertation because it forced me to look into certain aspects more deeper and to elaborate on other aspects more, and to take even totally different aspects more on board. It really shaped the quality of my dissertation. And in July and August, I could submit amended versions of the dissertation to the university, which were then accepted. And in December 2019, I think it was the 2nd of December, I had my defense. I had my defense of the dissertation, and I do remember very well when Ms. Stoichkova, the head of the scientific jury, at the end stood solemnly up and said, well, from this moment on, you can call yourself doctor or PhD. This was a very emotional moment for me because it really marked the end of a very long journey in my life, and I could hardly believe it. But it was true, and afterwards we could celebrate a little bit with the former rector, Mr. Vazov, and Professor Chelyskova. It was a very nice atmosphere there, and it was perfect. So it was really a remarkable moment in my life. Next slide, please. I already said that it was very big luck that I found the VOZF University. Here I really found a place and a structure that is open to new ideas and to new research proposals, not necessarily topics which are at the core of the university's expertise. But I found really a professor, Professor Chelyskova. She was really open to my idea. She was open. She was listening to me. She gave me her opinion, but I never felt that they are stuck to a certain topic or to a certain direction. I really found a very open environment here where you could really unfold yourself. The entire university I found, or at least I experienced, as very flexible, and everybody really was taking care of the individual constraints. I also made the experience that you have this one-shop-fits-all structure where you only have a full-time or part-time doctorate program. Either you take it or you leave it. But here it's really, I really felt the flexibility. They really tried to consider your personal impediments, your personal obstacles. So this was really, this was a very good experience. I all the time felt very fairly treated. And this especially also from a foreigner's perspective. I don't speak Bulgarian. I don't have any clue about the Bulgarian academic and scientific structure. So I really relied on what my supervising professor and the other colleagues of the VOZF University advised me, and I really felt very fairly treated. I also saw very streamlined internal processes, making me really concentrate on my actual research work. I know there are plenty of background processes. This is everywhere the case, but all these background processes were organized, or most of them were organized by my supervising professor. Professor Chelyskova really organized everything in the background. She liaised with the scientific council. She organized the setup of the scientific jury, invited professors, talked to the administration. So really, I really could concentrate full time on my actual research work. And so Professor Chelyskova was also very hands-on. She was really very good supervising professor, and she really took the initiative and supports me in all my matters. So she was really not just a supervising professor, but also a mentor, to say, yeah. And with the VOZF University, I also made the experience that they are also interested in keeping a contact even after finishing a PhD studies. So I was appointed as a member of the VOZF lab, and also the fact that I can give this practice sharing session really is a good example that VOZF University is really keen to keep the contact to its alumni. Next slide, please. But I also want to say some words on the role of my employer, the European Court of Auditors. I must also admit, without this employer and the backup I have here at the Court of Auditors, I would not have finished the PhD studies so soon and so efficiently. First of all, I could use all the background information I come across during my audit work here. So my doctoral studies were about topics I every day deal with here in my practical work. Of course, I could only use the non-confidential information, but nevertheless, I had plenty of background information here. I also had the opportunity to talk or to use the information I came across during my audit work and to discuss the matters with colleagues not only from a technical point of view, but also from a methodological point of view. How do you see this? How would you approach this issue? So it was really fruitful discussions with my colleagues here. I could also use the in-house library and resort to our technical support when I was struggling with Word in the final stage of my dissertation. And I even was granted a special leave. So I really enjoyed a very prosperous environment here, which really enables to develop yourself. So this was a very good experience also. Coming now to my advice based on my experiences. Yes. Next slide. Yes, thank you very much. Well, let me start with the main problems I encountered during the entire process of my doctoral studies. I mean, I don't want to bother you with all the minor things. I want to concentrate on four main issues, which are, to say, general issues, which everybody who is striving for a PhD program might have to this or that degree. And based on these problems I encountered and the experiences I made, I can give you some advice at the end, which I think might be valuable to reflect upon. But let me start with the main issues I encountered during the entire process. With the process, I don't necessarily mean the process here at the VOZF University. I mean my entire endeavor, which actually started in 2009. First of all, the main issue was to find the proper research topic. This was really something I underestimated. A proper research topic, which on the one hand is worth to analyze and which is also able to be analyzed. Not everything you are interested in or which is worth to analyze, you can analyze. Some things are purely not or it's purely not possible to touch a certain issue or to scientifically touch a certain issue. So this was a very big issue, to find a proper research topic which is of your interest and which you can really add value to the scientific world. Another big issue, which is also quite, I can imagine is quite common, is to bring the professional workload and the private life imbalance in common. And on top of it, to go for doctoral studies. When you work full-time, and when you work full-time in a job that is quite demanding, then you have, for instance, audit missions, business trips, and so on and so forth. And then you have also a family, and maybe you also have a private life. Even to bring those two worlds in balance is a challenge. But on top of it, to go for doctoral studies, this is really, really, really a heavy thing, because going for doctoral studies is not a thing you invest 2 weeks or whatever, like for a training. It's really highly sophisticated mental work you need to invest. You need to immerse yourself in a topic. You need to concentrate, and this you cannot get done with 1 or 2 hours a day. This is, at least I don't think this is possible. And so this was also a very big challenge to bring this in line. And then, of course, it's always the thing to find the proper university and the supervising professor which are open for your research topic and open for accepting your individual plan, or I'm speaking for myself, my individual plan. This was also a highly challenging thing. And at the end, it stopped it stopped quite often when I asked about this individual plan. I could have been hired as a full-time or even as a part-time PhD student, but this was not the structure I wanted to go for. And the last thing, this is also a very common thing, is the last issue is the longer the process lasts, the more I lost focus and the more crumbled my motivation was. It was, in my case, like a sinus curve. Sometimes I was very enthusiastic and very motivated. For instance, once I finished a publication, I thought, well, this is a very good topic. I could very efficiently use this topic and go for doctoral studies. But then I realized, well, I do not make any progress finding a supervising professor or a university. So I lost motivation and I lost sometimes even the faith a little bit and went down, and then it went up again when I realized another possibility. So it was really a sinus curve. Based on these problems and my experiences, I can, or if I should give some advice, I would give 3 main advices grouped around 3 main topics. First of all, my advice concerning the topic is you should choose a topic that is of your high personal interest and where you have already some insights in. Basically, there are 2 ways to go for it, 2 ways to find the topic. The first thing is you have a good relationship with the professor, and the professor accepts you as a PhD student, and you work on a topic the professor gives you, because the professor is interested in a certain research topic, and you elaborate the topic of the professor. The advantage is the likelihood you are accepted as a PhD student is higher than with coming with your own topic. But the disadvantage here is, of course, this is not your topic. This is a topic the professor is interested in, but not necessarily the topic you are interested in. And you might keep the motivation for a longer period of time. So this might be problematic. And so in my case, it was much better, and of course it took me longer, to elaborate your own topic, your own research topic. But the likelihood that you will be accepted with this topic is, of course, lower. It's of course lower. You need to find a professor who's interested in this topic. So there are pros and cons. But with your personal topic, you are much more motivated to go for it, because this is yours. This is your unique topic. You developed, you elaborated, and you can later on be proud of. I also think it's worth to go for a topic where you have already some insights. It's hard actually to start with a topic from scratch. It takes you much longer and it's much more burdensome. When you have a topic where you already have some insights from a practical or theoretical point of view, it might help you to get the wheel rolling. Yeah. Then it's also worth to choose a topic where you have some connecting factors with your professional work. It's easier to choose such a topic where you have some interlinks with your practical work, because you could use the information you come across during the course of your professional work. You could discuss matters with your colleagues, and you already have some deep insights from a practical point of view. So this is also beneficial and worth thinking about it. Regarding your personal attitude, I can just confirm that you need a long breath. Normally, you need a very long breath to get it done. You need stamina. You need to stay focused. You should adapt yourself, your methods rapidly. Do not postpone. Stay tuned. Here, I mean, at the beginning, you only have this long-term goal to someday to defend your dissertation. But only with having this long-term goal in your head, you might lose yourself in all these particularities and these different steps. And maybe I'm too typical German, but I need a certain structure. I need a certain structure. Break down the big goal into milestones. Let's say one of the milestones might be to finish the 3 assignments, for instance. And then set your internal deadlines to achieve these milestones. And don't post but realistic deadlines. Realistic deadlines. Doesn't make sense to set unrealistic deadlines. This would just cause frustration. But set individual and realistic deadlines to each of the individual steps and sub-steps. And then go for it, strive for it, and do not postpone to achieve these milestones. And once you have this broad structure, you can make the structure more detailed, and this is really a guiding path through this entire process. At least in my case, it helped me very much to stay tuned and to stay focused. Which is also very important is to ask for advice. To ask for advice, don't sit yourself in your little room and elaborate on a very theoretical topic, and then you just draft your dissertation and that's it. This is not my impression of doing research. Research is also about interaction. Interaction with your peers, interaction with colleagues, with your supervising professors, and ask for advice. What might be your colleague think about this topic, even if the colleague is not a very specialist in this topic, but he might give you some valuable insights maybe from a different angle, from a different perspective. And also don't take the advice you might receive not as personal criticism, but as a booster for the quality, as I did when I received the comments from the scientific council. It just, and this I can really confirm, it meant an increase in the value of my dissertation. Just take only the positive things on board. Stay in close contact with your supervising professor. Discuss matters which you are not sure about with him or with her. You should avoid to invest time and efforts for Wayne, which at the end turned out that this is a total wrong approach, a total wrong direction you went on, and you invested so much time. So here my advice is to stay in close contact, in close cooperation with your supervising professor, and that you get the feeling of the state of play of your work. This is very important, that you get an impression whether you go in the right direction or whether you should invest here and there something more. With this advice, I reached the end of my presentation. Of course, I'm open for your comments, for questions now, but I also invite you to send me emails afterwards if you have any questions. In the last slide, you find my contact details. I would be delighted to answer your questions in written, and you can anytime contact me. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, and you, Dr. Bode, for sharing your experience during your work. So, did we have any questions according to the topic? Yes, Mrs. Mikhaila Georgieva.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have one question. As I followed your speech, and I noticed that this PhD work, in my opinion, has a lot in common with the DSD exam. I don't know if you know it. This is no, okay. This is Deutsches Sprachdiplom.
Okay.
This is something like an English exam, like CAE or IELTS or anything that is connected with knowing the language. And we also had to pick a topic, and we had to choose very carefully and make a long research. But yeah, my question was if you personally think that they are common, but since you're not informed regarding this particular exam, I don't think it is.
You mean my professional qualifications or the PhD?
The PhD, the work, and the whole like structure.
Okay, I'm not familiar with this DSD, Deutsche Sprachdiplom, but as you're saying, this is more related to acquire language skills. I wouldn't think you can compare this scientific PhD research with this, but I'm sorry, I cannot say more because I don't know this Sprachdiplom.
It is really not a problem, but we also had to choose something which is connected with either science or a specific field. So we also had to be very specific with knowledge, examples, and so on.
Yeah.
But thank you very much anyway.
To express yourself in a German language, I assume. To choose a topic where you can express yourself in a
Not only we had to do a whole work, it is desde mappe, like many pages. I think 80 pages or something like that, with different graphs and explanations and researches. So yeah.
But you can send me maybe this thing afterwards. You have my contact. Maybe I can help you further, but I'm afraid I cannot help you very much. But nevertheless, you can try. You can contact me if you want.
Thank you very much for the answer anyway.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I want once again to thank you to Dr. Bode for his presentation, and to wish you all have a nice evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Take care. Goodbye. Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice evening.
Have a nice evening.
Bye.